Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the July 10th, 2024 meeting of our Accessibility Committee. This is the first meeting we have had with a number of our new members and some of our former members. And welcome to you all. I want to call the meeting to order, and if you would join me for a short moment of reflection before we begin. Thank you. I always count from 1 to 31 in French when I do that. So, and I can still do that. Okay. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest around the table? If not at this time, if something should arise, feel quite free to disclose. I do have a short preamble here I would like to read before we get any further. It involves public participation with our committee, all of our committees. Members of the public are encouraged to provide the committee with their comments and questions. Presentations must be prearranged with legislative services before the agenda is released. Members of the public who wish to make a deputation about a specific agenda item at the meeting must register in advance with legislative services by 4 p.m. On July 9th, 2024, by contacting the deputy clerk at meaford.ca or 519-538-1060, extension 1110. Presentations are limited to 10 minutes and deputations are limited to 5 minutes. Now, today we have no presentations nor deputations, but before we get going, I mentioned before, we have a brand new committee. This is our first advisory committee to deal with accessibility since we have reorganized our committee series, and I'd like to have everyone present go around the table. We'll start with our members of the public, and we will begin with one of our veteran committee members, Mary Solomon, and I'm so delighted to have Mary back. Mary is a very busy lady and a great contributor to our municipality. I'll just remind you, before you speak, if you push the little talk button on your mics there, and then when you're finished, if you would push the little talk button again, that will mute you, and then the next person could jump in. So yeah, and for our newcomers, by all means, give us your name and tell us about yourself. Okay, Mary, go ahead.
As you know, I'm Mary Solomon, and I am a veteran on the committee. I looked back the other day to see how many years, but I'm really pleased to be here again. And just for those that don't know me, my background and living experience with disability, I have a husband who's been paraplegic for over 50 years, actually broke his back here in Meaford at Fred Raper Park, but he would tell you that hasn't stopped him. So he's had been in business here in Meaford for many years, and he's retired now. And we also have a daughter who's autistic, so gives us a whole different. On the more professional level, I was a physiotherapist for, 40 years, mainly in rehab. I ended my career doing stroke rehab and was the district stroke coordinator. And so lots of experiences there. And I always feel I'm committed to accessibility a lot for those patients. I mean, we work to get better, and then you go out and the environment or the community isn't ready for you. And it's really sad when you work that hard. So it's always been sort of a commitment for me. And probably my other part of that is I really got into sports. So I've done therapeutic horseback riding and downhill skiing and things like that. So that kind of fun part too.
Thanks, Mary.
I'm Wendy Best. I've become interested in disability or accessibility issues primarily over the past 2 years because I've got a parent, my mother, and she has mobility issues, poor vision, and dementia. And as these things have worsened, her world has just gotten smaller and smaller. And so things I took for granted are, of course, increasingly difficult, like how do we get out of the house? Where am I going to park that's close enough? Is there snow, slush, a curb? Can I get into the business? If we can get in, where's the washroom? I almost have to scout out ahead of time for those things. And then I think it really hit me in the head in September 2022. I had to take her for day surgery. And even at the hospital, I encountered difficulties. So I was given a wheelchair when we came in. Oh, you don't need that walker. Here's a wheelchair. Great. Went up to the day surgery area. They said, go take her in that change room and get her changed. I couldn't get the wheelchair in the change room. And then I saw there was a washroom opposite, but it was blocked by a cabinet. So then at that time, she was more mobile. I could get the wheelchair to the door and walk her in there. But that's when it really hit me. I thought, wow, even if our hospitals are not equipped that well, it's, anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Wendy.
Good afternoon. My name's Sherman Wood. With getting diagnosed with polio at a young age of 18 months, I've been battling disability for quite a while now. And as I get older, I'm finding that it's getting harder to get around, and I need to learn how to make my way around in the town and municipality. And I'm really interested in finding out other people's thoughts on their ideas to make improvements to the accessibility. I've been involved with many organizations and committees in my past with the municipality of Grey Highlands, through being president for the recreation for 13 years. And but I was still involved. I like to be involved now, being moved back to Meaford because I was born here. I want to get involved with the Meaford community and be active too with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather.
Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Murray. I was born and raised in the Beaver Valley area, and I've lived in the Meaford area more or less all my life. I started working at Meaford Hospital at 19, and I was frontline nursing for many years, helping patients solve their disability problems while they were in there, and enjoyed being able to make things a little easier for them as they recuperated and went home safely. I also was in purchasing, and I learned to source items for some of these people, walkers, wheelchairs, things that would make their life a little bit easier. So when I came across this accessibility committee, I thought, I think I'd like to be on that. So I look forward to working with everyone and learning new things. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stu Hiltz. I taught university for 35 years and served on many more committees than I wanted to. We retired to the Beaver Valley in 2010, moved to Meaford in 2017, and I became paralyzed from the chest down 4 months later. So I have been learning how to run a wheelchair and how to find my way around. We traveled a lot. I went hiking and paddling a lot before, so my world has really closed into the space between my house and downtown Meaford. So I'd like to see that as accessible as possible. I have a lot of neuropathic pain across the level of my spinal cord injury, which comes and goes. I think it's mostly getting worse as I get older, but I've learned to cope with it in various ways. My pet issues, if you want to say that, would be the accessibility of stores on the main street, particularly restaurants, which is really, really limited. And the intersection of Sykes and Nelson. I've been stuck on those sidewalks at least a dozen times, and I had to call on pedestrians to give me a push, which is probably not safe for either the pedestrian or for me. So I was very active before in the conservation field. When I saw this committee and started learning about accessibility issues, I thought this would be a sensible place for me to contribute. And I'm learning more and more about what it means all the time. Thanks.
Well, thanks to all of you. And I just want to add that we do have another member, Truda Howard, who is not able to join us today. But thanks to all of you. And we have 3 very notable staff members with us this afternoon. So I would like them to continue with their and tell us a little bit about them. Bart, yeah, go ahead, please.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bart Toby. I am the Chief Building Official for the municipality of Meaford. I have been a senior building inspector or a chief building official for the better part of 30 years. I served a significant period as when I worked for the municipality of Wellesley on their ODOA accessibility panel within the region of Waterloo. And so I've been on committees like this in the past. I do have a few disabilities. One is my main one is my lack of hearing. Yeah, so, but there are disabilities in my family, and I've worked and volunteered with people who have disabilities, be it mobile, physical, or mental, and I have a great appreciation for the difficulties that individuals who have a disability have to work through, and if there's an opportunity to make it better, I'm all ears. What's left of my ears.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex, the acting clerk for the municipality, and you've probably received an email or 2 from me at this point, but I'm always here if you need support. You'll be seeing lots more of me in the future.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee. I am very honored to be here today to be serving on this committee as well. My name is Sarah Mahan. I am the Director of Human Resources and Community Services. I think with my background in human resources of over 27 years, I have a deep appreciation for accessibility, but that is not the only reason. I lost my mom in 1993 to multiple sclerosis. And at that time, as you can imagine, there was no accessibility. She was very limited, much to what Stu was saying, that restaurants, anything on the main street was just not accessible to her at all. And so I'm very honored to sit here and be a part of making great change for everyone. Thank you.
Thanks very much to all of you. We'll go forward with the agenda, and now Alex did everybody get the minutes of our last meeting that was sent out? Okay, that's item 5A on our agenda. And I'll start off by asking for a mover and a seconder for acceptance of the minutes. So Mary, I know you were part of them, but we'll have to have one of our new members second it. Is that legislatively correct? Alex, can we do that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. For those who maybe haven't served on a committee before, I'm about to go into the orientation where we'll talk a little bit more about movers and seconders and all the procedural kind of stuff. But just to get through this item on the agenda, essentially what this means is we've taken minutes, which is our sort of record of our last accessibility committee meeting, which was actually last November, November 15, 2023. So when Councillor Greenfield asks for a mover, it's just one of you raise your hand as the mover. I note you down as the mover. Then someone will second and then raise your hand. I'll note you down as a seconder. If anybody has any sort of, you reviewed the minutes and you see a typo or you see something that maybe wasn't right. I know the last meeting, not all of you were a part of the committee. But if there is something that stands out, you can bring it up here or you can let me know later. And then the chair will just ask for a vote. So you all just raise your hand, and then it essentially means that those minutes have been officially approved by the committee so that we can post them in final to the public, and then we file them away with our record keeping procedures. So it's just a little bit of a procedural component there. So I have Mary as the mover, and then Councillor Greenfield, if you wouldn't mind asking for a seconder, and then we'll call the vote and proceed.
I would be glad to have a seconder for this motion to accept the minutes. Don't be shy. Okay. I think Wendy got in there first. Before we vote on the minutes, there's some interesting stuff in these, and I wondered, Mary, I know you had a couple of concerns and comments. Do you want to just advise us as to a couple of the things you brought forward?
Sorry, I did read them last night and then promptly forgot them at home.
Oh, it's been a while ago.
Oh, okay. So one issue that's come up numerous times now is the fact of our regional transit. Okay, I think that's in the minutes. And that's just that early on when transit started, it is part of the AODA that we should have transit that is accessible to everyone. It doesn't mean you have, it's not really satisfied by having parallel systems. It's okay to have parallel systems, but Grey County Transit did say at the beginning of COVID, which kind of shut everything down, but said after it, we would have a transit system that would be a mixed transit system. And it has never happened. And so we, I believe in these minutes, again, wanted to reiterate to them, we would like it looked at because, sorry, but for me, I think it would be great to go with my family, stand on the street corner, catch a bus and go to Blue Mountain. And, right now, the whole system is still not the way it was. I think you still call up even for like for anyone able-bodied who wanted to use the transit now, they still are calling. So it's never gone to what it is. But we would just like to push that having it a more integrated system. We still need that other system where you can phone for, very specific appointments, but we'd like to just see a system that everybody can use. So, and especially the other thing here, too, is that the system is not working for those who may not be, have mobility issues. But I take people like my daughter, we have parents driving to Thornbury every day, dropping kids off at, or shouldn't say kids, adults off at Events for Life. if we could get the transit to change a bit of their route, these are people that could easily be served. So I think that was one of our things, was to ask them to please have another look at this. This is the way it should be. And so that was that long part right there. And oh, and the communication boards, we've been very lucky in the past that Families for Autism have communication boards that they put up, and that we definitely would want them. There's one at Memorial Park, and that we would like to continue that. Now, Families for Autism have had some changes, but they did let us know that they still have the communication boards, so.
Thanks, Mary. Was there anything else that anybody wanted to ask about or question about? In number 9 on the minutes, the communications part, 9D, one that always comes back to us, and that's concerning the patio structures on Main Street. It's in addition to getting into the actual building, sometimes the patio structures are a real challenge. And I don't know, Art, do you have any update on the patios, or are they all accessible? Have you been?
So I couldn't answer that question because we didn't issue building permits for those patio structures.
Okay.
And so that's the patio policy, something that's under review in the next 6 months. And that question will be addressed sometime in the near future. So I suspect that it'll look differently going forward as next year.
Oh, okay. Thanks for that. If there's nothing more, we have the minutes moved and seconded. So I will ask for your vote. All in favor of accepting the minutes? Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we will continue then, and we've got some educational items on our agenda. If I can get my clicking done here, sorry. Okay, we'll move into number 7. 7A has to deal with the terms of reference for the Accessible Advisory Committee procedural bylaw. Then we'll go into roles and responsibilities and the code of conduct. And Alex, are you going to help us along with these?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So more or less, this section of the agenda, I would treat it like a resource section. We're not going to go into detail and read, the terms of reference of procedural bylaw. But obviously, this being our first meeting, what we've been doing for all of the committees is we've just been sort of linking the terms of reference that was obviously adopted by council via bylaw. So that, obviously this committee is also governed by the AODA. So we have that component kind of in it as well. But if you have any questions on sort of the scope of the committee, the mandate, again, a lot of the procedural stuff, you'll find it in the terms of reference. And then the procedural bylaw is the sort of bread and butter of legislative services, if you will. It's just the bylaw that we use when it comes to what's included in our agendas, what's the role of the chair, just all the procedural elements. The Municipal Act requires that every municipality has the procedural bylaw. So it's just sort of one of those overarching bylaws that kind of governs what we do in our meetings. Do you guys have any questions about that by any chance? No? So I know some of you have served on committees before. So the orientation that we're going to do, if you wouldn't mind, Bill, pulling up the slideshow, I'm going to try not to blab for too long because I know some folks have to get going earlier today, and I do want there to be enough time for us to chat. So I'll just kind of run through the orientation, and I'm assuming you guys have already seen it with the agenda being posted a week ago. So if at any point you need to interrupt me with a question, please do. But I'll try and be brief. So we did just touch on the establishing bylaw, the terms of reference, the procedural bylaw. This orientation touches on some of the legislation that would be relevant to us. So we just quickly talked about the establishing bylaw. So the terms of reference talks about the mandate, responsibilities, meetings, administration, roles, and reporting in the committee. So again, we're not going to go into detail as to the wording that's in the document, but it's a good sort of resource to have. We talked about the procedural bylaw. So this slide touches on just sort of some of the items with regards to how we sort of run our meetings. Motions. So I think it's great that we had sort of an example of a motion prior to this. It's just sort of how we communicate with each other within a meeting. It's how we keep our records. So if, you know, we use a mechanism sort of when the chair calls on one of us to speak, we say through you, chair, if you're having a discussion with someone else. If you forget to say that, it's not the end of the world. It's one of those mechanisms, like I said, to have sort of good conversation, good discussion, respectful discussion kind of thing. And then, like I said, once we've kind of, the discussion has sort of died down, the chair will ask for the vote and everyone will raise their hand. So as we're kind of getting started with this committee, we might not be doing too many motions in the beginning. We might, you know, just sort of be focusing on discussion. And then I can kind of see us going more into crafting motions as we've had a few meetings and we actually start making recommendations for things. And it really becomes the record that, you know, sometimes might carry on to council. We talked about the motion from the last meeting that we worked on with Margaret with regards to Grey County Transit. So that was a perfect example of us as a committee making, moving a motion, voting on it, and it represents sort of a recommendation from the committee. So it's sort of an official way to put a decision forward. Voting, we talked about that. So everybody does need to vote. Nothing's going to be passed unless it's unanimous. Everybody puts their hand up and agrees. So the agenda review meeting is something that we've implemented for the newly established committees. So the committees are running in sort of a 3-week cycle. So if we work backwards from today's meeting, last Wednesday, you would have received the agenda, and the Wednesday before that was our agenda review meeting. So basically what the agenda review meeting is myself, Councillor Greenfield, and one of the committee members. So Councillor Greenfield would be responsible for asking if you'd like to come, or if you would like to come, just go ahead and volunteer and we'd be more than happy to have you. But this meeting is just so that we have a little bit more inclusion into what goes onto the agenda, so we can hear from committee members and the chair before, you know, staff releases that agenda for the meeting. This just talks about the headings you'll see in the agenda. So we like to keep it pretty standard and you'll see sort of the same order. It makes it a little bit more predictable and organized that way. I think with the committees, we might add in a different heading here or there, depending on what kind of discussion we're going to have. But the structure of the agenda essentially comes from the procedural bylaw. So preparing for a meeting, this is kind of like what I just noted. The agenda review meeting 2 weeks before, the agenda is published 1 week before, and then the meeting day. If you can't attend the meeting, just let me know. Another note as well, all of our meetings are live streamed. So if you can't attend a meeting, you can watch it afterwards to see what was talked about. And also if there's anybody, you know, anyone from the public that would like to come and watch, more than welcome. These are open meetings. Same thing with, obviously, anyone can watch us on YouTube as well. And that gets to the next slide here about how our meetings are live streamed. So meetings can only be held if quorum has been established. That's another note as well. So quorum just basically means half the committee members plus one are able to attend. If quorum cannot be met, then we have to cancel the meeting. So that's why we ask, if you can't make it, just let us know ahead of time so we can move things around if we need to. Committee members will sit in the horseshoe during the meeting, just like we're all sitting here. Microphones, you guys are already pros with the microphones. And presentations, that's another good one as well. If there's somebody that would like to come and make a presentation to the committee, so I can see, you know, maybe we'll reach out to Families for Autism to come and make a presentation, or, you know, any group that might want to present to this group, more than welcome. It can be any member of the public. I will also note we I would like to see, it's great, it's awesome that we have Sarah and Bart here today, and I would like to see other staff members come to the committee. I have arranged for our project manager of facilities to come to the next meeting because she has some stuff in the pipeline that she wants to put in front of the committee, again, falling in line with that AODA legislation. So I would like to see even our new director of economic development come in to talk maybe more towards the patio program, things like that. So I can foresee staff members coming to make presentations to the committee. But like I said, members of the public can come, local groups can come, all of that. And I hope to see a lot of that in the future. And I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself for some reason. Participation, I just talked about it, so we're good. This just talks about some legislation. So we just referenced it or in the orientation. The MFIPPA it's kind of a mechanism for the public to have access to our various records. And it also talks about obviously the protection of privacy. So we don't have to get too far into that, but it's good to be aware of it. Same thing with the Conflict of Interest Act. So this kind of goes into our code of conduct. It's again to protect public interest, provide transparency and accountability in the decision-making process. Our advisory committees are very much a part of the council's decision-making process in many different ways. So that's why it's important to have the code of conduct and those sort of parameters in place for our committees as well as council. This just kind of makes a note that we keep our correspondence as much as possible to our open meetings. And this is just a note that our agenda is not, we don't change it after it's been published. Again, that's sort of keeping the public transparency element there. Once the agenda is out and the public has access to it, we're not making any changes. And then I will say as well, with regards to meeting dates, we have booked our meetings for this committee for the rest of the year. We did that for all of our committees. So we do have the next one noted on this agenda, September 11th. And I believe we have a couple of other ones afterwards. I don't believe I've sent you all a full schedule, so I'm going to have to look at that. But I will note that we have everything booked. So we're kind of good to go for the year. So that's all with that. I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Chair. I don't know. I'm wondering how detailed do you want me to go into the code of conduct? Because I know we only have a little bit of time left before some folks have to start leaving. So do you want to just move on to committee inquiries and I can bump this to the next meeting or?
Thanks, Alex, and thanks for that presentation. First of all, are there any questions for Alex? I know she ran through a lot quickly, but if there is nothing, no, yeah, Mary, go ahead.
Maybe not a question, but I know when I first came on the committee, it was good when they clarified our responsibilities because I thought we had a lot more influence in the town than we actually did because we were very, not that we're limited, I don't mean that, but it's municipal. And so we may be able to influence saying, about the restaurants and everything, but unfortunately that it's not actually under our direct, is that right? I don't know if other people, but I was very confused about that because I sort of came in with the same thing, like we can change it all, but there are some limitations, but we can influence, right?
I actually really like that. There are some limitations, but we can influence. That's a really good way of putting it. So this committee is a little bit different than our others in the way that we have that AODA legislation. So I mean, I don't know how great my memory is here, but there's certain components in the act that actually say we need to consult with this committee on certain decisions, but you are correct in our advisory committees do not have the ability to make decisions. They have the ability to make recommendations, and that is essentially what we go to the committee for. A great example would be the subcommittee component to the accessibility committee. This is something that is very niche with the advisory committees because the AODA prescribes that the accessibility advisory committee can be in a subcommittee setting. And an example of having a subcommittee would be when we worked on the Meaford Hall ramp, there were some accessible parking spots that were to be installed. The municipality got some grant funding for that. And then we had, I believe it was you, Mary, and one other member of the committee come to us to the actual site and help with the recommendation as to where to put the spots. So that would be an example of, again, looking to the committee for their recommendation. It's that sort of nuance of you're not necessarily making that final decision, but you are influencing it, right? So it is a fine balance that can be sometimes a little bit confusing when it comes to committees. But I think something that's very important to highlight when it comes to committees is that this is a great avenue for just including the public and for public consultation. You're all members of the public, and this is a great way for you to look over specific topics that have to do with accessibility and provide your recommendation and feedback to our council. And it essentially will help them with their decision. So there is sort of that two-step process there.
Art, do you have any comments on that? On how we might be involved, more involved?
Through you, Chair. So there are absolutely everything as Alex has said is very true. All I can really add to it is that there are nuances of the Ontario Building Code, and people's wishes or this committee's wishes are sometimes very different. And the Ontario Building Code is legislated law from the province of Ontario that the municipality doesn't have the power to change. So, for instance, that door in the hospital that was too narrow, probably that door was put in the 90s, maybe the 2000s, and was probably, I would say, a 36-inch door, and was legislated at that time to be okay. And the Ontario Building Code doesn't have the power to change that door because the building code is in buildings that are being constructed as of now. But I can tell you that because of groups like this, or because of changes in the Ontario Building Codes, because the Ontario Building Code is a living document, that door would have to be now almost 38 inches. And that would accommodate your wheelchair in a brand new hospital or a hospital that had a recent renovated room. So I don't want you to feel like you're frustrated, but the code is one of those documents that kind of changes with time, and that has a huge impact on construction being built today. And so there's things that you may want, but we can't do because we can't put legislation in that conflicts with the code. But that doesn't mean it's not important, and that doesn't mean that municipal buildings could not have those standards that are higher than the minimum standard. So for instance, if we said we wanted doors that were 40 inches in the new municipal office or something like that, or a new door, and those are things that we could bring forward and look at.
When it comes to heritage buildings, Bart, and we've had a number of downtown heritage buildings have applied for permits for revisions, new windows, new doors, and so on and so forth. Does the Heritage Act coincide with AODA requirements, or are they two separate animals?
They're two separate animals, and they just like as the building codes, the floor, each one kind of has to build on top of the other. So say if you were changing the use of a building to say an assembly type of occupancy where we're getting the public to come in, that building would have to be accessible to the standards of the Ontario Building Code. And we would need to address the heritage issues, even if they impacted the heritage issues in a negative way.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Alex, do you want to go on with the code of conduct, or?
Yeah, sure. I can touch on it, and I'm sorry if I'm speaking very fast, but I don't, I'm kind of just, I'm like, I want to make
Okay.
sure you guys have enough time to chat. But this is very important stuff, so I will try to slow down a little bit. So the Advisory Committee and Volunteer Code of Conduct. So we'll cover a little bit of what the Municipal Act requires and the Advisory Committee and Volunteer Code of Conduct that we actually have as a municipality. So the Act has required councils to adopt a code of conduct for council and for committees. So there's a quote in there right from the Municipal Act regarding that. The bylaw that we have for our code of conduct for advisory committees is bylaw 2016-23. I am working on a little bit of an update to the code of conduct, but I will have that available to all of the committees. We do have just a document for the committees to sign off on, and I'll have that ready once we've sort of made that update. Sorry, there's a fly in here. The municipality values the contribution of its volunteers, including the advisory committee members, which are appointed by council, so you folks. And this is essentially, the code of conduct essentially outlines sort of how volunteers are expected to carry out their duties, and that it is consistent with the municipality's values of respect, integrity, and community. So it just ensures a common basis of acceptable behavior, more or less. And sort of, if we consider volunteers ambassadors of the municipality. So it's just sort of a document that governs that. So this is just saying the code does not replace or supersede any statutory provisions. The general principles and values, so support the mission, vision, and values, respect decision-making, maintain professionalism, all of that kind of thing. It talks about standards of behavior as well, so dignity and respect, conduct respecting staff, and member conduct as well. So just sort of some of the principles outlined here in the slides. It also talks about the process for complaints. So the code of conduct is sort of that governing piece where if somebody wanted to make a complaint of a council member or a committee member, there is a process that allows for that. And that is all we have on the code of conduct. Is there any questions about that? I think it's pretty straightforward.
Thanks. That's good. The code of conduct it's basically about respect. And I think if you can keep that word kind of in your mind, that's the main thing. Okay, I have a couple of things, if that's okay. First of all, back in the committee orientation, I think it mentioned something about committee members sitting around the horseshoe, and that's here now. Are we going to try for that? Like other than having Sarah very close, I feel kind of lonely up here, and I guess I should include Bill, but I know that's not real straightforward, but I apologize. I should have been here sooner than I was, but I was talking to a couple of young ladies down at Meaford Hall about a performance that's coming up in November, so I took a little longer than I thought. But I didn't know if you folks had discussed seating prior.
I think when everyone came in, we all just started to gather here, and I once everyone was comfortable, I just figured it's all good. We'll just, I mean, it's different. Like usually we have the committee members up at the top, but I don't see any problem with it if it's more comfortable down here, but.
Is there any problem with the screen, Bill?
No.
That's okay. All right. No, I'm good.
It is a little different, but I just kind of went with it.
I get a lot of facts, though.
And I guess before we do wind down, I'd like to open it up to our advisory committee members, if you have any items, potential agenda items that you'd like to have discussed, mention them now or get them to Alex, but anything to do with the downtown or our parks or the harbor or the cemeteries or some of our rural facilities, like we have 3 rural community halls that maybe aren't quite 100% when it comes to physical accessibility, but anything at all. I'm hoping the library is as up to date as possible, but if you'd like to jump in on this, I'd like to hear. Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
I just wondered actually with respect to agenda, if the municipality had any strategic priorities for accessibility, for example, like it seemed to be transportation and parks at the last meeting. Is there any more specific parks or specific buildings? I know the arena is often a topic of conversation. So through you, Chair, to you, Chair, does the municipality have any specific?
Well, this is the type of item I'd like to have on the agenda to clarify some of these questions. But, Alex?
Yeah, I'll just say, thank you for bringing that up. I think when Councillor Greenfield and I had met 2 weeks ago, we wanted to keep this very open so we could hear what kinds of things you wanted to sort of discuss. And the municipality does have a multi-year accessibility plan that was adopted back in 2023. So we could include that on the next agenda as sort of, if any of you haven't seen it, if you'd like to review it, and then we could sort of chat about it. And I mean, that would be sort of a good starting point if that sounds good, or we're more or less leaving it super open just to kind of get things started.
Yeah, we have the community well-being plan too, and there's maybe different pieces pieces of literature that could apply. Mary?
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. I just have a question, Mr. Chair, through you. If I'm downtown and I see a curb or something that isn't accessible and I think, oh, I wonder if we could fix that. Do I come back here with that? At the corner, such and such, there's a sidewalk and I think there should be a ramp. How do we address things like that?
Go ahead, Mark.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So if you see an issue, something like that, where it's a trip hazard or, an obvious, then you can make a complaint through the municipality and we'll log it in, log it in. What is it? Tom rooms? Yes. And so those complaints will, get reviewed by the appropriate people and then determined if it's something that we can fix or something that has to wait for larger infrastructure. This group in my past has been, kind of key to doing reviews of, policies and design guidelines that municipalities have create. So say if there's a new engineering standard on how the curb cuts can be done, or we're going to change the streetscape of something, then this group would get the chance to see that and make comment on it. It also can go to when we have development where, if we have a new subdivision coming in or say a new large project coming on board, then this group can see those drawings early and then have a comment. And that's my experience. That doesn't mean that's the end of the experience. It's just what I've seen in the past. So I think there's some opportunity for that. It's kind of limited because it has to follow the requirements of the code and what the developers want to do.
Mary?
Through you, the chair. We haven't done that before. No, I was just going to add, that's exactly what we've done in the past. And the other thing I think too is the municipality looks at the other strategic plans for the other areas. So if the arena is up this year and, you know, with they're definitely going to be dedicating changes, then often that will come to our committee. But complaints like Heather was talking about too, sometimes we'll come back here. We've had that in the past too. Not that we're going to solve them, but it may be that there's some input, or sometimes they fall between it. You know, they're really in nobody's area. It's kind of something nobody's thought about. So, yeah, but using that complaint, we call it feedback, don't we? That using the feedback for accessibility really does work though, because it gets your complaint in there a lot faster than waiting for, yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think we could raise a lot of interesting issues by discussing accessibility to the stores downtown. There are building code issues, there are financial issues, there are the obvious accessibility issues. It bumps into the patio issue because it's a lot easier to make the patios accessible than to make the restaurant accessible if it isn't. And I'd like to see a wide-ranging discussion around those things so that we could begin narrowing down on some tangible steps people could take.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I agree. Oh, excuse me. I'm trying to get rid of it. Darn cold now for about 2 weeks and it will not abandon me. I've had concerns with the patio situation ever since we started it, really. Again, it's they're not municipal buildings, so there are problems. And I think the last thing the municipality wants to do is to cut into the successes of our downtown businesses. But on the other hand, we do want them to be as accessible for all, and that hasn't happened as of yet. So no, I'd like the committee to have a discussion about that, and we'll see what we can do. I mean, we can advise council, we can go to council, we can pass motions here that will be forwarded to council. And I'm not saying we're going to have positive results, but I think it's a matter of getting the word out there. It's a matter of us bringing forward our concerns, because if we don't, the problems aren't going to get heard, and we have a chance to be at least the origin of bringing these concerns forward.
One area in which the municipality could influence access downtown, at least in the winter, is snow clearing. We have banks of snow where it's really hard to get out of your car and in onto the sidewalk even, never mind getting into a business. So that is in the municipality's area of influence. And I think the other way this group can influence that is, I mean, it's more illustrating the economic influence of people with disabilities. I mean, businesses are having a tough enough time without getting battered over the head by another rule. But if they could be shown, look, this is a large group of people. They would love to go into your business and be a customer. That's an area of influence. And I think a lot of that issue is visibility. So if we could get people going out in numbers, a group of people going out for lunch, start by going to the places that are accessible, and maybe some sort of system. I don't know if it exists whereby, say I want to go out for supper and there's system that tells me this business has an accessible washroom and I can get in the door with a wheelchair or something like that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, certainly the economic factor is important, very important. Mary?
There's a few of those types of things, and we tried it here a few years ago. We actually had a little, I wouldn't say it's an award, but it actually showed if a place was fairly, fairly accessible. We had criteria, and maybe bringing something like that back would be great. And the other thing, I think years ago, we tried to inspect all the places and figure out, this was this and this was that. But yeah, some can do some types of wheelchairs, some could do others. But what would be great is even to have that list of questions so people knew what to ask if they phone the place and it gets 45 times they get called and asked the same question. Those questions are important. And the third thing is there's some provincial things now going on where people have advocated, and you can go on their website, and I know it's websites and not everybody does those, but you can go on and actually rate the restaurant or the business. And we should maybe start to put, like, not reinvent the wheel, but just push into doing some of those things. And yeah, but the economic, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. And we have a very senior population. If you want to do well here, there's a reason the churches were the first ones to pick up putting in ramps and elevators and that. It was to keep their their population up. So you're totally right, Wendy. That's what we need to do.
Subcommittee plans for discipline grant building. Lost reduction. Still have to generate that. Person to that, or at least maybe having our new members thinking about whether they might want to get involved with that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if my memory serves me correctly, I think what we had done is we had the project at the time of the regular meeting, and then we appointed committee members at that meeting to serve on the subcommittee. I think that's what we did. I don't think we appointed subcommittee members at the beginning. Or am I remembering that incorrectly?
I think what happened was, yes, the first time we had to do that, we did form the subcommittee, and then that subcommittee just got called
That got carried forward. Oh, I
got
see.
carried forward for other projects.
Okay.
Because of the timeliness, often, they'd want to bring it up at this meeting, but they had to, had
Right.
timing problems. So we would go in, give our input, and then it would come to the meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So,
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll take that and I'll bring something forward to a suggestion for the next meeting. It might have been because this year we have our regular meetings a lot more regularly scheduled. So I don't think we'll run into that issue if there was a point where we needed a subcommittee to be consulted for a certain project. I feel like we would have enough notice to appoint them at a regular meeting, but that's a really good question, and I'll look into it, and maybe we can decide at the next one if that's okay.
Sounds good. Okay, I just was wondering about that. Now, do some of our members have a time commitment here this afternoon? Is it at 3 o'clock? Okay, all right, because I don't want to hurry anybody out, but I don't want anybody to be delayed. Anything further? Alex did mention that we have another meeting in September 11th, and Sarah, do you want to jump in on anything?
Nothing from me at this point. I'm
Okay.
still in I'm in the learning stages myself, so
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, fine, thank you. Well, if there's nothing further, we've, I think, covered everything on the agenda for today, and it was meant primarily to be a get acquainted meeting, and I want to thank you. Thank you, folks, you members of the public, first of all, for putting your names forward, because it's much appreciated. Our municipality has been very well favored in the last few months with the number of citizens who have came forward and said, "Hey, look, we want to be part of this. We're interested. This is our municipality. We want to help build and promote and make this an even better place to live." So thanks for coming forward. And if there's nothing further, thanks so much.